Well, we are here again. This is part 2 with Mike Lyga. And Mike is an author from Independence. Why don't you bring us up to date on where you live and what you've been doing?
Okay, well, once I left Independence and finished college at Stevens Point, I got a teaching job at Ashwaubenon High School in Green Bay, and I've been living in De Pere ever since. So that's what I've been doing, and I ran a taxidermy business for over 50 years and did a lot of muskie fishing and owned a fishing tackle company and manufacturing company, and my big thing now is researching, and it has been for a good 25 years, researching the histories of World War II servicemen and women.
And you also did a couple of books. Didn't you do one on baseball?
Yeah,
in the county?
that was called On the Field West of Town, because that's what back in the 1800s, that's how the newspaper in Independence announced that there was going to be a game. It'll be played on the field west of town.
Oh, okay.
And that eventually turned out to be the baseball field at the high school, at the old high school.
Sure.
And they had a tremendous history over there, as did Whitehall and Arcadia and all. And there was a man by the name of Jerome Isaacs. He had been a World War II POW of the Germans. Here he was a Jewish man, and he was a POW of the Germans. And he called me one day, and he said, "Mike, you've got to do something about the old baseball players and the old baseball teams before it's all lost." And I was in the middle of an autoimmune disease. My first thought was, I don't need this right now. But I couldn't tell him no. So I told him, I said, I will look into it, and I'll see if there's enough information available to do some writing. I was stunned by how much information there was in the newspaper, local newspapers.
Well, baseball was really big
That
back
was the
then.
major story. That was the major story in these towns.
Yeah.
And the newspapers reported on them, and the reporting at times was hilarious. And so I did this history from Independence as the focus, with all the towns that they played, Whitehall, Arcadia, Blair, etc. And I wrote about from 1878, I think, was the first year where I found something in the Independence newspaper about a baseball game being played, through 1957, where pretty much it came to an end. And that was because of the Milwaukee Braves and television.
Well, yeah, I suppose, So that's another thing that you were interested, but we got to pull this back here to your new book, which is 2 volumes.
Anytime.
And it's called Lost to Time, and tell us what's in those volumes.
Well, Lost to Time is a compilation of stories. There are 42 chapters. Many, many, many stories embedded in those 42 chapters. There are 233, I think, names of Wisconsin veterans in the combined index in the 2 volumes. And it covers the entire state. These stories are just, so many of them are just they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
I sit back and you say, how did they survive this?
Right, yeah, it's just incredible.
Yeah. So
it really is. And today we're going to start out talking about Major John Krause.
Yeah, Major Krause was from Richland Center. He was married, his wife's name was June, and they had a little boy named John Jr. And he was 2 years old when Major Krause left for the Pacific, and he became the squadron operations officer for a group of B-29 bombers.
And he was at what, Army Air Force?
He was Army Air. Well, at that time it was the Air Force. Then it had changed over to the Air Force. Yeah, but he wasn't supposed to be up in the air at that time. He wasn't actually flying because he was operations officer. He was a guy planning all these these missions. But all these other, these B-29s were bombing Japan. They were bombing from Tinian and from Saipan in the Mariana Islands. And so on December 27th, 1944, there was a mission planned to bomb airplane factories in the outskirts of Tokyo. And the day before the mission was to take place, a pilot by the name of Guy Dobbs Jr., he was from Georgia, I finally found out, he was in a Jeep accident and broke his leg. So they were short one pilot. So Major Krause went on this mission.
So fate stepped in there.
Yeah, and not in a good way, as it turned out. But there were actually, these B-29s were 141 feet from wingtip to wingtip, almost half a football field. They were enormous. They could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs, and they could fly for thousands of miles. And so he decided that he would fly that mission because Dobbs had been injured. And aboard that aircraft that day, it was not only him as the pilot, but there was a man from Milwaukee named Kenneth Byers. He was a lieutenant, and he was I believe, the navigator. And then there were two other guys from Wisconsin, one being from Jefferson. He was the Central Fire Control Officer. Now, the B-29 was very advanced. In fact, something I found out that is just surprising was that the development from start to finish of the B-29 bomber cost more money than the development of the atomic bomb.
Wow.
Okay, so that's what a big deal it was. And so the Central Fire Control Officer, his name was Gerald Westerman, and highly trained because these bombers actually had a computer aboard. And the computer could, if a Japanese plane was attacking, the computer could figure out the angle it was coming in on them, could figure out their speed, could figure out all sorts of things, the distance they were at. And so all the gunner had to do was pull the trigger, okay, because the computer did everything. So it was way advanced. The fourth man from Wisconsin aboard that crew that day was from Osseo, and his name was Morris Tyler, and he was the radar operator. So off they go, 10 men, 11 men actually, because the squadron observer, his name was Walker, Major Walker. He flew aboard that plane also that day. He was the observer for the mission. And they took off, and they got to Tokyo Bay, and they were just swarmed upon by Japanese aircraft. It was estimated that there were 250 Japanese planes that attacked the American formation. And by now, the Japanese had been quite successful, actually, in the use of their kamikazes, in crashing planes into ships, giving up the life of one pilot to hopefully kill many Americans and sink a ship. That was their hope. Well, they decided by this time that, we could use these against B-29s too. So they had volunteers. Most of these men were 20, 21 years old, and they volunteered for suicide missions to crash into these B-29s. So they're coming across Tokyo Bay, and a Japanese plane comes in, just misses another plane, and within 2 or 3 seconds crashes into Major Krause's aircraft. And he hit it. If this is Major Krause's airplane flying here, he came in and he hit it at the nose, right at the nose, and it ripped a huge gash from the nose of the plane all the way to the wing. and it knocked off the number 3 engine. Okay, so now you had gasoline spewing out and it was on fire. Now, who was killed in that incident right there? It's hard to say. Chances are the co-pilot was killed. Chances are the navigator was killed because of where his station was, and probably the bombardier. If others weren't killed, they were certainly injured. So Major Krause gets the plane under control a little bit despite everything, and another plane came in and hit them underneath, right in the area in the middle of the aircraft where Morris Tyler from Osceola's station would have been. That doomed the aircraft. So Krause told those that were still alive and still able, bail out. Well, 3 guys were able to bail out, and they were, one of them was Walker and then 2 of the regular crew. And they bailed out. They were captured. They were picked up by Japanese fishermen, turned over to the authorities, and put into a prisoner of war camp. And when the camp was liberated at the end of the war, all 3 of them were still alive. Well, it was a matter of months, so they had a chance of surviving.
Still, that's pretty
but
amazing.
Major Walker had contracted beriberi, a nutritional disease, and he died 1 day after reaching the hospital ship.
Oh,
okay.
gosh.
So now, what happened with the others? Reports were recorded in the debriefings that they saw gunners aboard that B-29 as it was falling. It was doomed. It was not going to survive. As it was falling, they were still firing at Japanese planes, and they were credited with shooting down 5 Japanese planes.
Oh my goodness.
But they hit the water, Tokyo Bay, and exploded. And so they were, those still aboard, if they hadn't already been killed, they were killed. After the war, they found, in 1949 it was, they found the wreckage of the aircraft in shallow water, and there were human remains. So all the remains were gathered up, and they are now buried in a communal grave at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
And so, but, you know, all these guys were killed, and the neat thing, I won't say a neat thing, but one of the things that has meant a lot to me is I had put a question on a World War II aircraft forum online, looking for the regular pilot, looking for his name because I could not find it anywhere in any records. And after a couple of months, I got this email from Major Krause's great-granddaughter, who lives in Milwaukee. And so she starts telling me that John Jr., the little 2-year-old boy in the photo that's in my book, with his dad and mother, was living in Milwaukee. He was 84 years old, I believe, living in Milwaukee. And so I have been in touch with both of them. I've also been in touch, or I was contacted by Major Walker's nephew and the nephews of 2 other men who were aboard that plane, from that story. The incredible thing about this whole story was thousands of Japanese were watching that air battle. Major Krause's plane was the only one knocked down that day over Tokyo Bay.
How many were in the formation, do you know?
Well, no, overall no. It was a large, what I want to say is that in the whole entire formation, it was just under 30 aircraft. Okay, it was under 30 aircraft in the entire formation, but in Major Krause's immediate squadron, I don't remember, I don't know the number. But his was the only plane knocked down. And and on the ground, it was written that there were thousands of Japanese watching that battle take place. And one of them had a camera and took 2 pictures. One of the B-29 coming down at an angle like this, spewing immense amounts of smoke out of that wing, and then the other one after it had exploded on the water. And so those pictures are in the story.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there were three survivors. But
3 survivors, but only 2 survived after the war.
Right.
The one died of beriberi.
It's just amazing that anybody survived something like that.
Morris Tyler of Osseo was killed. So.
And you said the Morris Tyler was associated more with Eau Claire?
Well, no, he grew up in Osseo, but when he went into the military, his mother moved to Eau Claire.
Oh, okay.
And I was talking with somebody from the American Legion post in Osseo, and somebody there is on the story now trying to find out more about him because nobody knew anything about him.
Oh, okay.
They'd never even heard of him before.
Yeah.
So they are now trying to dig him out because he was associated with Osseo.
We should talk about a couple of local guys, and there's one I promised people I would ask you about his story, and that is Hank Gamroth.
Henry, yeah.
Yes, now wasn't he the town constable or whatever you want to say?
He was the town police officer, police
for
chief,
Independence.
for many years.
And I heard that he was.
Kids gave him a hard time, but he always took it with a grain of salt. You know?
I heard he was really good. People really thought he was wonderful.
Oh yeah, yeah. The kids liked him. I think that's why they gave him a hard time because he didn't go out just arresting kids.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
what was his story?
Okay, Hank joined the Army, and he was initially, he decided he was going to be a paratrooper because he got more pay. But on his first or second jump, he was injured, and that was the end of paratroop career. And so he ended up in Company B of the 3, I'm going to just look here, make sure I get it right, of the, let's see, it's
the 307th Infantry?
Yeah, 307th Infantry of the 77th Infantry Division.
Okay.
And they landed during the opening days of the Battle of Okinawa. They landed on Aishima, which is an island off of Okinawa. And the 307th was tasked with taking Aishima. That's where Ernie Pyle, who was the journalist, who the soldiers just absolutely loved. He was killed there. Okay? And so anyway, they eventually were brought onto the mainland of Okinawa, and they took over the position of, I think it was the 96th Infantry Division. They were heading south to take the Maida Escarpment and the Maida Castle, very highly defended area that the Japanese had. And so late in April of 1945, they were going to assault the Maida Escarpment they had, which was a cliff. It was only 35 feet high, something like that. It wasn't that big overall. But they could not take it. The 96th Infantry could not take it. And there were reports, men from the 96th coming down from combat, and one guy was reported as saying, "I'm not going back up there. I'm not going back up there." But then he picked up more ammunition and off he went. And so Henry's Company B was the spearhead of the spearhead. They were to climb ropes, climb ladders, and get up that cliff. And of course, the Japanese all the while were trying to kill them.
I was going to say, boy, that's really
Henry had
you're so vulnerable.
Yeah, just before that, a grenade had landed in Henry's foxhole and killed the 2 men that were with him. He was a squad leader. He was in charge of a squad of, with him there were 10 men, and he had to lead these men up along with the other men of Company B. which was about 120 men, although by then there were not 120 men left. And they had to go up this cliff.
Now, this was Marines or Army?
Army.
Okay.
And so they start going up, and the Japanese were firing with machine guns, throwing grenades, firing with small arms, mortars, and trying to kill as many Americans as they could. And Henry always thought that it was a knee mortar that exploded a shell from a knee. A knee mortar was just a small little mortar gun that you didn't want to actually hold with your knee because it would break your knee, but they called it a knee mortar. And he was knocked off of that cliff, and it broke his leg. And so he was down in front of a cave, and he could hear Japanese voices. And not knowing, were they Japanese soldiers, were they civilians, who were they? He had a grenade ready just in case, because he couldn't move. Then along came a guy, a corpsman, medic, and pulled him out of there, treated his leg and pulled him out of there. The man that pulled him out was Company B's medic, who was none other than Desmond Doss. Desmond Doss, for his actions at the Maida Escarpment, was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor. And many years later, Henry was able to actually call Doss. He tracked him down in Georgia, and to thank him for saving his life. Doss couldn't hear him because he was totally deaf by then, but he was able, through his wife, was able to convey that thank you.
And people might remember Desmond Doss from the Clint Eastwood movie Hacksaw Ridge.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that a movie, a very well-known movie was made,
very popular,
entitled Hacksaw Ridge. That was a common name for that particular ridge. It's technically known as the Maida Escarpment on the island. And but yeah, and if you watch that movie, and I'd recommend it, but make sure you don't do it right after you've had dinner, because you may not hold it down.
It's very intense.
It's very intense, very brutal. And there's a photo in the book of Doss standing after the battle, standing at the top of that cliff. And you can see all the cargo nets and ropes still hanging down there that the men used. And that's the point where Company B scaled.
He was an incredibly brave man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
To think all the people that he saved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doss, yeah, and he was a conscientious objector.
Right, yes.
He refused to carry a gun, but he volunteered to go in as a medic.
Sure, yeah.
And he just, by the luck of the draw, became the medic for Company B, which was Hank's company.
Yeah, that's really something
quite
when
a
you think
story,
about
yeah.
that. It is.
Yeah.
And now another one that's local, and it's a pretty good story too, was Mr. Warner.
Ray Warner, yeah, holy right. Yeah. Ray was in the 1st Cavalry Division, and Ray had been in some combat prior to ending up on Luzon Island in the Philippines. And what had happened was, right at the start of the war, a lot of Americans and a lot of Filipinos surrendered to the Japanese. And of course, the Bataan Death March, etc. Okay. Well, these men were taken to various prisoner of war camps. One of the camps was on Palawan Island, which is one of the islands of the Philippine archipelago.
It's in the Philippines, and I just rang a bell because my son went for a vacation there to do some deep sea diving.
Okay.
Palawan, okay.
Yeah, and Palawan, there were men from Wisconsin who were held there. The ranking American officer there was a guy by the name of Captain Fred Bruni, and he was from Janesville. Okay, now here's what happened, and this sets up Ray Warner's story. He was, it was getting, the Americans had invaded Luzon. The Japanese were getting nervous. And so the Japanese commander on Palawan, they were getting worried about being accused of war crimes and being executed for it. So he decided he was going to get rid of the Americans, get rid of the evidence. So he had the Americans dig trenches down near the beach, dig long trenches. And they were told that, well, because of the bombing that the Americans are doing, you'll be safe now in these trenches. So one day, sure enough, the air raid siren goes off and all the men are herded down to these trenches. So they're all in these trenches, and the Japanese covered the trenches with brush and branches, poured gasoline over them,
my goodness.
and lit them all on fire and killed them. Any of them that got out were simply machine gunned. However, about 20, I don't know if it was 22 or 24, did escape. And there was actually a documentary that I saw just recently on TV about this escape and how these men had to go through swamps that were full of crocodiles, and some of them were killed there by the crocodiles. The Japanese finally gave up chasing them down because they were losing so many men to these crocodiles and alligators. And so these 11 of the men finally succeeded in making it to American lines. They were taken after their story was told. They were actually taken to MacArthur, General MacArthur, to explain to them, here's what's happening. They're killing, they're wiping out the prisoners. They're killing the prisoners. And so MacArthur became very concerned. Interesting side note to this: my dad's commanding officer when he was stationed in Hawaii was by then promoted to MacArthur's staff, and he was there when this happened at MacArthur's headquarters when these men were brought in, and MacArthur asked them what was going on, and they told him, sir, they're killing the Americans. They wiped out, they lit them on fire, and they just executed, burned them to death. So MacArthur decided to stage some rescues, and one of the rescues was detailed in the book that I called Ghost Soldiers that I brought for the first program. These Rangers that were sent through Japanese lines about 30 miles, and they secretly made it to Cabanatuan prison camp, where they rescued 512 survivors of the Bataan Death March. Okay? But there were other rescues mounted. One was at Los Baños. The 11th Airborne Division was involved with that, where they actually had to go across this huge open body of water to get to the camp, and they did it undetected. And they rescued all of these civilians and soldiers that were imprisoned there. That Japanese commander, when it was all done, was so angry over the fact that all those men and women were taken out by boats that he went out, he ordered his men to just start executing civilians. And there were several thousand Filipinos just simply gunned down because of this. Then there was another prisoner of camp that they didn't even know about, and they found it by accident, and they rescued those men. But the big one was at Santo Tomas University. All these civilians, there were actually 3,700 civilians who were imprisoned at the start of the war at Santo Tomas prison camp. They were Americans, they were Dutch, they were English, they were all these different nationalities that they were just simply imprisoned. And MacArthur, was worried that, okay, are they going to kill all these civilians? So he brought in General Mudge of the 1st Cavalry Division and told them, okay, here's what's going on. Form a flying column, blow through the Japanese lines, get to Santo Tomas, and rescue those civilians. So General Mudge picked what he felt were his best men from the 1st Cavalry Division. One of them was the 8th Cavalry Regiment. That was Ray's unit.
Oh,
And so these 700 men, on right at the end of January, took off, and they had to go 80 miles, or 70 miles, I think it was, to get to Santo Tomas. Ray left a diary that we have at our museum in Independence, which I recommend to everybody to go and see. But he left this small little diary, and in it, a diary of this event. And one day he has the date on it, and it says, "My nerves are really shot. We lost a few men today. We're being shot at all the time." Another day, excuse me, when they got to the camp, they rescued these civilians, and he actually met some people from Wisconsin. And then another day, he talked about how they had to release some Japanese soldiers who had taken civilians as hostages. And so he was there for that. So all these I mean, it was one of the only cases where a Japanese officer negotiated with the Americans. Otherwise, they were just willing to die.
yeah.
And so anyway, they take off and they get through the lines and they rescue these 3,700 people. And Ray, somewhere during the Battle of Manila, picked up what is known as a senenbari. It's the scarf that the Japanese would wear.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And it was all, Japanese script on it. Senenbari kind of refers to thousand stitch scarf. And they were made by women who each would put one stitch in it and then pass it on. And they would say such things as, good luck, die for the emperor, kill the American dogs, that type of thing. And he picked one up off of a dead Japanese sailor. And he also, then at the, he went on through the course of the war, and he came back to independence. Then one day in the I forget now, I'd have to look in the book, 1990s, I want to say, Bob Edmondson from Independence had been in Japan, and he came home and he had a Japanese wife. And her name was Yoshiko. And so Ray's sons were out at that time, it was B&B, I think, bar at that point. And they were talking with Bob and his wife, and one of the boys mentioned about this stuff that he had brought home, and he always wondered, what does it say? So they went over the next day over to Warner's, and Ray brought this out. Now, you think the story about Hank Gumroth was something? This one just blew me away. I mean, this was 30 years after the war now. And she picks up this senenbari, looks at it, sits right down and says, "I know who this man was."
What are the chances?
This man was my mother's best friend's husband, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so this became a major story in Japan. The newspapers, TVs, television stations covered this as Ray sent this senenbari back to his widow.
Oh.
And she sent him a photo of him in uniform, and we have the photo in our museum, along with transposed letters from the city government and from her. Her name was Hana Sumida, Hana Sumida, and she was the widow of this Japanese sailor. And of course, Ray couldn't remember where he picked it up or anything. And they would kill all these Japanese, and then the caterpillars would come in and just bulldoze them into mass graves and bury them. That was it.
Yeah.
There were no records kept. So that was Ray's story. But he was
incredible.
he was a real hero for rescuing, putting his life on the line along
Yeah.
with the other 700 men.
Now you said cavalry, but there weren't any horses.
No. But this was the name of the unit, First
Right,
Cavalry
right.
Division.
Okay.
So it's still in existence today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. What are the chances of
well,
any of this?
unbelievable.
Yeah. Just unreal.
So who else do you want to know about?
Well, let's try this other Ray, and that is Ray Larson, who was from
Ray
Whitehall.
Larson. Ray Larson was from Whitehall. They say he was extremely bright. He went to the University of Minnesota for aeronautical engineering. But then he joined their officer training, their flight officer training program, and he ended up becoming a pilot, a fighter pilot during the war. And he was assigned to the USS Bunker Hill aircraft carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And they were off of Okinawa on, I think it was May 12th, 1945. And when the fleet was attacked by Japanese kamikazes, which was common then. And the Bunker Hill was hit by 2 kamikazes within
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Remember that kamikaze, when you translated it, meant something like divine
wind.
Yeah.
Divine wind. Yeah, and they were considered to be, if they died for the emperor, they would become gods.
Mm-hmm.
And one plane came down, crashed into Bunker Hill, followed by the second one within seconds. The second one penetrated several decks, and the bomb that it was carrying exploded near the officer's ready room, the pilot's ready room. This was where they would receive their orders as to what their mission was going to be. All 23, I think it was 23 pilots of that squadron, including Ray Larson, were in that ready room. And they said that when the bomb exploded, it sucked all the oxygen out into the fire. And all 23 of those men died, including Ray.
Oh.
And he was buried at sea.
Oh my goodness.
He was 23 years old, and he had just been married before being deployed with the Bunker Hill. So.
Very sad.
Yeah. And there's so many stories like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Now, how many stories altogether are in your books?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not even going to sit down and start counting them because, again, there are 233 names in the index, and so they are, about the story about Pearl Harbor. I've got stories about men from all the major ships. In fact, one of the stories has to do with 3 brothers from New London, the Barber brothers. And they joined the Navy, and they asked to be assigned together. And they ended up on the battleship USS Oklahoma. They were from New London. Did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
They were from New
Yeah.
London. And over near Green Bay. And they were aboard Oklahoma when December 7th happened, the Japanese attacked. And Oklahoma was hit by several torpedoes, and it turned turtle. It capsized.
Oh my goodness.
And 438, 39 men were trapped inside, including all 3 of the Barbers. And only, 3 dozen were initially recovered and identified. And the Barbers, none of the Barber boys were. So they did get in, and they started removing remains, and they found all these remains. In 2021, 2022, something like that, through the use of DNA analysis, they were able to identify, because all the remains were buried in these mass graves. And they were in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
And so then once DNA became a tool, they started opening up these grave sites, removing the remains, and then analyzing them.
Uh-huh.
And they were able to identify and therefore recover and account for all 3 of the Barber brothers. Randolph, Malcolm, and what was the third one? Randolph, Malcolm, and Leroy were the three. There was a fourth brother too, and he survived the war. He
And-
wasn't aboard he joined later.
And after, I think after this happened, there were 5 Sullivan brothers
Correct.
that all died when a Navy ship went down, and then they changed the policy, didn't
Right.
they?
Yeah, they were aboard a cruiser in the Battle of Guadalcanal, the sea battle of Guadalcanal. It was a night battle. The Japanese and American fleets literally ran into one another, and they were firing these enormous ships, Japanese battleships in these cruisers. They said that the battleships couldn't even lower, they were so close, they couldn't even lower their guns enough to hit the American ships. And one of the American ships there was the USS San Francisco. And aboard the San Francisco that night, was a man from Independence named Clarence Sura. And he survived that battle. San Francisco had been hit by, I don't know what the estimate was, 50-some Japanese shells, and it survived. But anyway, they were heading back. They were escorting the ship that the Sullivan brothers were on. They were escorting it back to Pearl Harbor, and a Japanese submarine spotted them and was actually, apparently, they think, firing at the San Francisco because it was closer. And the San Francisco spotted the wake from the torpedoes and was able to evade and it went on and it hit the ship that the Sullivans were on.
Goodness.
And all 5 Sullivan brothers were killed. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You know, the mother having a chaplain show up one day and say, I have bad news for you, and you'd better sit down.
But they did change the policy.
They changed the policy after that they could not serve together. If you go to Pearl Harbor, go out to the Arizona Memorial, and you look down the list of all the men from the Arizona that were killed on December 7th, you'll see a lot of brothers that were aboard Arizona.
Yeah, it was
among
terrible.
The 1,100 that were killed that day.
Well, here's another man from Independence, and that was Ensign Jerome Sabota.
Oh, yeah. My dad's best friend.
Oh.
My dad, Jerome Sabota, and Ernie Sabota, spelled different. Sabota was spelled differently in the two. One was 1 T, the other was 2 T's. But anyway, they had Polish names, nicknames. Dad was Spunt, which apparently had something to do with the fact that when he jumped off the bridge in Independence, he'd come up like a cork. And Ernie Sabota was Sheeny, which was a name that he kept for the rest of his life, he was known as. And Jerome Sabota was known as Umke. Dad and Jerome, went to River Falls Teachers College after high school. And while they were there, Jerome met a young woman from Stevenson, Michigan. They became engaged to be married and they were going to be married after the war. So Dad went off his direction with the Army in artillery, and Jerome went his direction with the Navy. And he was commissioned an ensign, an officer, and he became second in command. He was the executive officer aboard LST 324, I think it was. And in 1943, they were moving fuel, aviation fuel and ammunition from a base to a forward base. And normally these ships carrying all these supplies would be covered by warships. You know, they'd have an escort. And they needed this stuff so badly, they were just sent. And, you know, LST 324. Oh, by the way, LST, the soldiers or the men who sailed them used to call it stood for long, slow target or something like to that degree, you know. And so anyway, on one night, I think it was July 18th, 1943, his ship was hit by a torpedo from Japanese submarine RO-106. That was their designation. And the ship tore in half. There was this massive explosion. Jerome, the survivor said that Jerome had just left the bridge. He had been in command of the bridge at that point, and he had just left the bridge and probably went down to his room below decks, and that was the area where that torpedo hit.
Oh dear.
So was he killed outright at that point? Did he go down with it and drown? No idea what happened. But the next year, my dad was on his way for the Battle of Saipan, and he was aboard a transport, and he ran into another an officer of that ship who had also been at River Falls Teachers College. And the guy immediately said, "Boy, it was too bad about Jerome, wasn't it?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he was killed." My dad's mother never let my dad know that his best friend had been killed.
Yeah.
And my dad said he was so shaken by that. He said, as an officer, I could not let my men see me in that condition, in the condition that I was all of a sudden in.
Sure.
And he said, I went down below decks and just kind of found a spot to hide for a while. So, years later, this was somewhere around the year 2000. I had a student in class. Can't remember his name. I wouldn't give it anyway. But he came up to me one day with a pre-excused absence form, so that he was going to be gone from class, from school, but it was excused. Okay, excuse me. So as I was signing it, I said, "So, Johnny, where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to visit my grandma." So he was going to be gone Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, okay. So where does your grandma live? In Stevenson, Michigan. Pardon me? In Stevenson, Michigan. That's where Lorraine Volker was from. She had been, well, I'll tell you the rest of that afterwards. But so I asked him, I wrote down Lorraine Volker's name on a piece of paper and gave it to him. And I said, would you ask your grandma? Because I'm thinking that's the same age group. That's the same generation. So I'm wondering, did they know one another?
Well, this was Jerome's wife?
No, Jerome's fiancée.
Oh, fiancée.
Yeah,
okay.
because they were going to be married after the war.
Oh, okay.
And so he went, and he was a kid that couldn't keep him in class. He was all over the place. He was really a nice kid, but he had his own agenda. Okay. And so anyway, on Monday morning, I get up to my second floor room, turn the corner, and he's sitting right at my door at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was never on time for class before, okay? But anyway, I shouldn't say that because he was, but he was a free spirit. And he jumps up and he says, Mr. Lyga, you won't believe this. And I said, now here's another one. Wait till you hear this story. He said that he went up to see Grandma. He said, I showed her the name. Do you know, have you ever heard of this woman? And she said, yeah, not only do I know her, but she lives right next door and she's my best friend. She's my best friend.
Oh.
So I arranged through the kid, through the boy, and through his grandmother, if I could speak with her, because I didn't want to just call her and, maybe open old wounds. And so and Lorraine had consented, yeah, call me anytime, so gave me her number. So I called her one day. It turned out that she had been teaching English at Green Bay East when I got to Ashwaubenon, just a few miles away.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And when she retired, she moved back to Stevenson, and she never married. That's the impact that Jerome had on her. She never married, and she said, I am right now in my living room and I'm looking at our picture that I've had in my living room ever since.
Dear.
And she said, here's her comment. We were a handsome couple, don't you think? And so she died in 2015 in Milwaukee, a nursing home in Milwaukee.
That's very sad. And,
yeah.
And we got so many stories here, but time is passing. So before we want to wrap this up, now if people want to get your volume 1 and 2 of Lost to Time, what do they need to do?
Well, they need to contact me. I
Okay.
guess you can put the contact information. I can sign the books if people want. That's what a lot of people have been asking for.
There was
signed to somebody.
a very nice article in the Trempealeau County Times about you and
Yeah.
your project with the books.
On December 27th, yes.
Yes,
issue.
that was really nice.
Yeah.
And how are the book sales doing?
Oh my goodness. I've gone through 90 sets in maybe 6 weeks or 7 weeks, less than 2 months.
Uh-huh.
And that is a lot more than I thought I would.
Well,
But it's because of the TV station, because of your program on the TV station, and then the YouTube replays,
right.
and the newspaper story. And then on Amazon, they're selling almost daily. And I'm also almost daily, and I'm not exaggerating, there are sales almost daily on Amazon taking place. And it's got to be because of those two outlets, the TV story and
Sure. Well, and there is interest in the World
yeah,
War II.
Yeah. I just heard from a woman today. I was on my way over here, and I had just gotten to a stop sign, and my phone rang. So I thought, okay, I'm at the stop sign. There's nobody behind me. I'll just take the phone call. It was a woman from the state of Oregon who had seen the TV show and wanted books.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So yeah, and so my goal is to keep the stories alive. That's what I want to do.
That's an
I promised my
important goal.
dad that.
That's very important. And Mike, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come all the way across the state here today.
Yeah, we didn't get to tell too many stories, but they were so long.
I know, that's okay, because we can have you come back again.
Okay.
But we do appreciate this, and there is a lot of interest, and these stories are really special.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that these people are not being forgotten.
And the stories in the book are from all over Wisconsin.
Right.
And to read about John McCune, who was a hero at the Battle of the Bulge from Odena, and to hear about Lester Burgum, who flew paratroopers on D-Day.
There's all kinds of stories,
Oh my
aren't
goodness,
there?
yeah. And Jimmy Cram and
Yes.
from Galesville, and Morris Tickfer from Arcadia, who the Legion unit is named after, and how he died. And
so we've got fertile ground here for when you come back again.
yeah, oh yeah. There are stories yet to be told, believe me.
And it's just important not to forget these men. But
right.
Mike Lyga, we really want to thank you for coming in again today, and we'll definitely have you back.
So.
We'll have you come back.
I mean, if you've got the time, I've got the stories.
Okay.
Believe me, I've been accused of that. I've told people, I said, I think I talk too much, and I've had people just laugh when I tell them that.
Oh,
so
it's great stories.
I do talk too much sometimes,
but we want to thank you, and we'll see you again.
Okay, thank you very much.